Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita and this is Yes and Improv. And in this video I wanted to go over some of the basic elements for starting an improvised scene. Now I talked about this a little bit with Jim Neeb in a previous video, but mostly looking at what his perspective was. And I wanted to point to something from my book, Short Form Improv, which is available on Amazon. And chapter 1 is Foundations of a Scene. So in short form improv, it's short scenes and improv games, and I'm focusing primarily on scenes at this point because a bulk of your improv games involve a scene of some kind. It's not typically a vanilla scene where you're just improvising a scene. There's usually some added elements of challenge. So the idea that suddenly the action that has happened in the scene will then go in reverse order with an improv game like Forward Reverse. It goes back and forth, or a game like New Choice where at some point a moderator will interrupt and the last thing that a performer said or did is erased and they present something different, taking the scene in a completely new direction and in many cases upping the stakes. But in order to really be able to do all of those games, the added layer of challenge, you have to be able to just do an improvised scene. And in short form, you don't have a lot of time to do that. These scenes are usually 2, 3, 4 minutes. They're not often longer than that because if they are, it starts not being short form improv. It starts being something else. And the audience has a limited attention span. So I don't really like to see scenes that particularly go on for a long time necessarily. There's always exceptions. But for what you are probably doing in a relatively standard improv show, is a lot of short scenes and games. So if you can establish some of the 4 basic elements in the first 30 seconds, the first couple of offers that happen in a scene, then it makes it easier for that scene to unfold and it makes it easier for your brain as a performer to focus on that added challenge, whatever it is. It could be something like we're doing the alphabet game where each successive line of dialogue spoken by a performer starts with the next letter in the alphabet. So you might start with a random letter like F. So the first line of dialogue should start with F. It should be, for God's sakes, let's do something about this. And so the next letter in the alphabet is G. So the next person who speaks has to start their line of dialogue with a word that starts with the letter G. So you're having to think about this. You're having to pay attention to what letter are we on, as well as everything else that's going on. So if your offers contain some really good clues as to what those 4 elements are, the better the scene is typically going to be. So what are those 4 elements? Well, we look in the book, and it's on page 12. It's setting, characters, relationships, and plot. Now, there's no prescribed order to do these. So let's take a look at them in that order. As setting is where does the scene take place? So if you're making an offer that contains some clues, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be so on the nose. What we're trying to avoid is saying things like, hello there, I'm Dr. Johnson. I'm the head of surgery at this hospital where I've worked for 12 years with you, Dr. Jones, who is an orthopedic surgeon. I mean, people don't normally talk like that. So it's a little disingenuous. It's a little artificial. You don't want to have that. But if you can say, Dr. Jensen, that's an offer and it contains some clues. It's not hard and fast, but the assumption that the audience will make and the assumption that the other performers who are in the scene or could potentially enter the scene is that you're probably in a hospital. It could be a clinic. It could be a hospice. It doesn't have to be. So you're not necessarily, at least not yet, you're not locked into that. Could be a conference. It could be like, Dr. Simmons, what are you? I didn't expect you at this conference. You don't normally like to go so far north. So that's another bit of another offer with some clues. But we go back to the original one, Dr. Johnson. There's potentially a relationship offer there. We don't know a whole lot about that relationship, but we know that these 2 characters at least know each other. And again, it's not written in stone yet. It could be like, yes, I'm Dr. Johnson. So if I responded with that, then I'm making an offer to you that I've accepted. I've yesed your offer. I am the doctor that you referred to. But with my I'm clarifying our relationship is one of, I don't know who you are, or maybe I just don't remember who you are. And that can organically grow. But by saying it that way, I have then given a clue to the original performer, the one who started with the Dr. Johnson offer, that I've decided to play this character that doesn't know you. So you're building that scene. That's the organic nature of improv, is that it's not prescribed. It's organically unfolding. But you want to acknowledge. So with the first offer of Dr. Johnson, we have established a character. It's an endowment. So I haven't established my own character if I say Dr. Johnson as my first offer. But I've endowed the other player as Dr. Johnson. We don't know what type of doctor they are yet. That may be inspired by the information you got from the audience. If you got a suggestion or some other topic from the audience, it might have been doctor, it might have been hospital, it might have been something completely unrelated to that. That's also usually fine. But if you start a scene with like, hey, there's not much to sink your teeth into with that. Now let's say instead of that you say, hey, Dad. That is an offer that establishes a relationship. So the other character is the dad and my character is their child. It could be son, daughter, who knows. That's not specified yet, but we have a relationship. We have an endowment again. And the way that I say, hey, Dad, could help establish character. So character, setting is where it is. Relationship, who are these characters to each other? Do they know each other? Strangers is a relationship, and if we establish that, then at least we know. We don't want to be ambiguous with our initial offers, not for very long. We need to get to some specificity relatively early so that we can make better offers and then take the scene in an interesting direction. So a character, it can be not just that I'm a doctor, but I might be a paranoid doctor. That could be a character. I could be a doctor who's also a patient. That's another level of interest that could be in the scene. And then the plot. What is this scene about? That's usually one that doesn't necessarily spring up in the first offer or two, but it can. It can be like, doctor, another patient is going into septic shock. So that could be a clue as to what this scene is about. Is some mysterious ailment or pandemic, perhaps, that is striking people down. And so it could be how we're dealing with it or trying to get to the bottom of it. So that's an offer that could potentially establish the location, some plot, a little bit of a relationship, even some character. That's a pretty powerful offer. Again, don't put so much pressure on yourself that you're like, I've got to establish 2 or 3 things with one offer. Just establish something. And then if you are a performer, whether you're in the scene or thinking about entering the scene, or even if you're the original performer, you want to think about what are those 4 elements, setting, relationship, characters, plot, that hasn't been established yet. And that's an opportunity for you to add some clarification, to add some offers, to add some elements to your scene work that establishes those things so that the audience knows what's going on and your fellow performers know. And that's really the case. The bad improv, the improv that's just not that compelling, or it's boring, or it's confusing, or it doesn't go anywhere, or it doesn't lend itself to those improv game components, usually can be traced to the fact that there's too much ambiguity or there's not enough clarity. There's just, nobody knows, nobody's on the same page about who these characters are, what their relationship is, where the scene is taking place, what is going on, what's the scene about. Something's missing. That's usually why that scene is not working. It just doesn't make sense. So that's what I wanted to cover in this video. I don't want to go into too much depth because there will be other videos, and I wanted to get a chance to get response from people. If you're new to improv, let me know what you think of the videos and what else you want to learn about. If you are a veteran of improv, feel free to share some of your wisdom and let me know if you want to have a conversation with me about some element of improv. Happy to fold more people into the Yes and conversation. There's plenty to talk about. There are plenty of ways to get better at improv. This is one of the fundamentals, I think, for scenes and scene games, is establish a couple of things. You don't have to get all four of those elements into the first 30 seconds. But if you get something in there, it's something that you can, it's a frame of reference. It's context that all the performers and the audience have, and you can build on that. So that's it for this one, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.